Om Tabakatamratam Taptajivanam Kavipiridinam Kalmashapaham Sharavanam Srimadatam Bhuvigarnanti Purirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are getting towards the end of the chapter, Visit to Vidyasagar. This is the third chapter, and the visit takes place on August 5th, 1882, and for those who are following along in the book, it's page 108. So, Sri Ramakrishna has been talking to Vidyasagar, and there's a room full of people, some of Thakur's close devotees. M, of course, is always there. There's not, because he's the one who's recording everything. So we know that M will be there. M's the one who brought him. He's the one who knew Vidyasagar. And some other devotees are there. Some of the neighbors have come who have heard that Sri Ramakrishna was coming, and they, out of curiosity or out of sincere interest, they have come. And then there'll still be some of the petitioners who were there, who had come to ask Vidyasagar for some type of help, either a scholarship or some funds or helping with food, whatever. So there's a room full of people, and Sri Ramakrishna is oblivious to everything, and going into samadhi, singing songs and talking to Vidyasagar. So the last thing that we had was that Brahman and Shakti are identical, like fire and its power to burn. When we talk of fire, we automatically mean also its power to burn. Again, the fire's power to burn implies the fire itself. If you accept the one, you must accept the other. This is Sri Ramakrishna's way of saying that Nirguna Brahman and Saguna Brahman are not two separate things. When we talk about Brahman, the impersonal, absolute, pure consciousness, and when we talk about Ishvara, the creator of the universe, or the projector of the universe, who dwells within the heart and who withdraws the universe at the end, they're not two separate things. They don't exist side by side. They're one and the same. They're identical. And this, so when he says Shakti, if we say Brahman and Shakti are identical, when we say Shakti, we really mean Saguna Brahman. We don't mean the power associated with the Brahman. We mean Brahman with his power. So the example that I always like best is the one that Swami Swahanandaji used to use about the mother and the woman. The woman aspect is always there. When the woman has a child, then the mother aspect is there, but the woman aspect is there also. She doesn't cease to be a woman, she remains a woman. So this Nirguna Brahman is the essential feature because it's always there. Brahman has to be there. When the mother aspect is not there, that simply means that it's potential. So Sri Ramakrishna sometimes will say the only difference between Brahman and Shakti, or Brahman and Kali, or his understanding, Brahman and Saguna Brahman, is the example like the snake. Sometimes it's coiled up and not moving, and sometimes it's wriggling along the ground. That will be the Shakti part. When it's not moving, that power has to be there. It can't start wriggling unless that power is there, only it's not active. That's the only difference. So then he says Brahman alone is addressed as the mother. This is because a mother is an object of great love. So the second advantage to this concept, first advantage is that we can see that if everything is projected out of this Brahman, then everything is divine. This is the view of the Shaktas. Second is that we have this relationship of the loving relationship that a child has for its mother. So there's that psychological side to it also. There's nothing objectively real in the sense that we will say God is a woman, God is not a man, but God is a woman. It is not exactly like that. We have a little bit of freedom to think of this absolute reality in the terms that appeal to us. So this is one of the ways of doing it, addressing God as mother. So he says Brahman alone is addressed as the mother. This is because a mother is an object of great love. One is able to realize God just through love. Ecstasy of feeling, devotion, love, and faith, these are the means. Listen to a song. As is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. As is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. Jaman bhav temni labh. Thakur liked this expression. He used to use this all of the time. And faith is the root of all. If in the nectar lake of Mother Kali's feet my mind remains immersed, of little use or worship, oblations, or sacrifice. Now, Sri Ramakrishna will speak on this theme over and over again. One reason is that Kali worship had a terrible reputation in those days. And all we have to do is look at Narendra, his attitude, which is very typical of the Western educated, typical because the British thought that this was really the lowest possible form of religion, of worship, to worship this bloodthirsty goddess with a cut off head in one hand held by the hair, and then a sword to slaughter people, and tongue sticking out and red with blood, and making sacrifice of goats and sheep and sometimes water buffalo. He thought a horrible thing. And so Narendra, Swami Vivekananda, he used to say, how I hated that Mother Kali. And he used to look down on Sri Ramakrishna. He used to say, even after all of his realization, he still goes there. It means that he goes to the Kali temple. So Sri Ramakrishna kept trying to explain to him that this conception that you have of Mother Kali, that this, of course, this is what we read in the Puranas and everything, but he said a very nice thing. He said, what you call Brahman, I call Kali. That I'm not talking about some conception of God as a mad woman who's dancing about and slaughtering demons and everything, that I simply mean that Brahman together with Shakti, that combination. So that was his conception. Of course, he liked this other image of Mother Kali, and the funny thing is that Swami Vivekananda fell in love with it. He fell in love with this Kali worship, especially the terrible aspect. And he wrote that beautiful poem, Kali the Mother, and he used to say, I don't speak about it very much. It's my own special fad. He said, I have this special love. And then he talked about how Sri Ramakrishna turned him over and really consigned him to this divinity which he called Mother, and how that Mother was directing him to do everything. So Swamiji came to Sri Ramakrishna as a Nitya Siddha, as a perfect soul, but that the perfection was covered by a lot of funny, subtle ideas that he had picked up through his English education as a member of the Brahmo Samaj, which had to be, in some cases, flipped around a little bit. And ultimately, Swamiji said that, yes, how I argued with the Master. He said, for 6 long years, I argued with him over this and over that and everything. So now I know every inch of the way. And now I know that everything he said was right. So Swamiji was bold that way. He could say that. So Sri Ramakrishna, after singing the song, he goes on. What is needed is absorption in God, loving Him intensely. Now, what is the advantage to this devotional path? If we really think about it, the main advantage is the intensity, because this is the most important thing in spiritual life. This is what Thakur says, that if you float on the surface, you won't get the gems at the bottom of the ocean. We have to have this intensity, we have to have this longing, there's a great desire, and this can come through devotion. Now, not that it's impossible in the path of knowledge. And again, I always point to the Buddha as an example. He had that intensity, he had that incredible longing. This life isn't worth living unless I know the truth. But for most of us, because we're emotional people and because we know what it means to have an emotional tie to another person, we know what it means to love someone, we know what it means to miss someone, we know what it means to long for the company of someone. So we can utilize all of those feelings and direct them towards God. So this is one of the great advantages to this path of devotion. What is needed is absorption in God, loving Him intensely. Anuraga is this intense type of love, and vyakulata, these are the two terms that Thakur likes. Vyakulata is this anguish of heart. This is what carried Sri Ramakrishna to the vision of the Divine Mother. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't that he was so great in meditation that he would sit for hours on end. Most of the time he was weeping and rolling on the ground, tears coming out of his eyes, just calling piteously, Ma, 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 Mother, Mother, Mother. And he would come the next morning from the pine grove where he was spending the whole night. People would see his eyes were bloodshot, filled with tears, and his body would be dirty and everything. So it wasn't that he was studying the scriptures and doing deep meditation and doing japa, all of these things. No, his heart was breaking. He was in this state of anguish. So the Vyakulata, this was the vehicle that took him to his first vision of the Divine Mother. It wasn't that some guru said, you do this and you do that, and he followed those practices. It was just this tremendous longing of the heart. So he knows what he's talking about. What is needed is absorption in God. The mind doesn't care for anything else. Loving Him intensely. The nectar lake is the lake of immortality. Amrita has both meanings. It's in Greek is ambrosia. The same word, amrita, ambrosia. This was the nectar of the gods. If you drank it, you became immortal. So this is the same idea. When we use this word amrita, it can mean nectar, but literally it means immortal. So a man sinking in it does not die. We dive into that. And later we'll find, of course, that very interesting conversation that Thakur has with Swamiji. He asked him, suppose that there's a cup filled with this nectar of immortality, amrita rasa. And you're a fly, and you want to partake of it. What will you do? So Swamiji said that I'll land right on the edge, and I'll lean over, and I'll sip it from that position. And Thakur said, why? He said, well, if I don't hold on to the edge, if I simply dive in, I'll drown. So Thakur said, no, my child. One doesn't die if one drowns in the ocean of immortality. One becomes immortal. So we can really say that these are, if we want to enjoy that nectar, then we'll keep a slight distance. That means that sense of I. If we want to merge and become one, then we'll dive into it. So Thakur is saying, a man sinking in it does not die, but becomes immortal. Some people believe that by thinking of God too much, the mind becomes deranged. But that is not true. This was actually a statement that was made by Shivnath Shastri. He was one of the Brahmos that Thakur loved more than he should have loved, if you ask my personal opinion. Thakur always talked about it, how he longed to see Shivnath, and he used him as the example. You see, as long as he's not here, we're talking about him. As soon as he comes, then we simply enjoy his company. But the Shivnath, he would say that I'm coming, and then he wouldn't come. And he's the one who made this statement, that Thakur, by thinking of God too much, and he used the term behead. Behead means he's lost his head. It's an interesting word. This be is, I think, some Urdu prefix, and the head is the English word head. So he's gone off his head. He's gone crazy. So he also had this idea that Thakur, he's a good person, he's very nice, he's a great devotee of God, but he's gone off his head, behead. He's become deranged. So sometimes Thakur will say, the Shivnath used to say that, and then here he's just mentioning it. But that is not true. And he would also add that it's not like thinking of ordinary things. You can lose your head that way. Thinking about pure consciousness, one cannot become unconscious thinking of consciousness. God is the lake of nectar, the ocean of immortality. He is called the immortal, Amrita, in the Vedas. Sinking in it, one does not die, but verily transcends death. Then he repeats the line from the song, of little use or worship, oblations, or sacrifice. Now, why do they say that worship, oblations, or sacrifice are of little use? We have to remember, if the mind is immersed in this nectar lake of Mother Kali's feet, that means once we've reached this stage of anuraga, then and Thakur will talk about this Vaidhi Bhakti and anuraga, then we can dispense with the preliminaries, with actually not dispense, they drop off on their own. And we don't have to bother with, well, let me get up at a certain time, let me do a certain amount of japa, let me spend this time in reading and scriptural study and keep to my strict routine. Because the whole mind is immersed in God day in and day out, so there's no need to follow any of that. So of little use are worship, oblations, or sacrifice. If a man comes to love God, he need not trouble himself much about these activities. One needs a fan only as long as there is no breeze. The fan may be laid aside if the southern breeze blows. Then what need is there of a fan? So this is the point. It's not that we reach the point where we don't need that fresh breeze coming. We need that breeze, but we don't have to do it ourselves. It's become natural. It's become spontaneous. It's become effortless. That breeze of grace, we feel it, and we're being carried along by that breeze of grace. Before that, we have to make some effort, but afterwards it becomes spontaneous. So this is that two-tier system. We see it over and over again. That first self-effort and then grace. First is Vaidhi Bhakti and then Anuraga. First activity, karma, and then shama, and then lack of activity. In Gita we find it in many places. But the second stage is very, very high up. This is the final rung of the ladder. We have to go all through this tamas and rajas and sattva to reach that perfect sattva, and then we can say, yes, the breeze of grace will carry me the rest. We won't even say it. It'll automatically happen. But we shouldn't pretend we've reached it. If we haven't reached it, we have to keep struggling. So Thakur says that, yeah. You'll have to work a little bit for all of this. To Vidyasagar, the activities that you are engaged in are good. And Thakur meant it. He is not just flattering him. He appreciated what Vidyasagar did, but saw the limits of it. It is very good if you can perform them in a selfless spirit, renouncing egotism, giving up the idea that you are the doer. Through such action, one develops love and devotion to God and ultimately realizes Him. Now, Vidyasagar wasn't a very egotistical person, but Thakur must have seen that a little bit of this feeling that I'm doing so much, I'm helping people, a little bit must have been there. And he was a proud person in some respects. We know that. He was head of the Sanskrit department at the university, and he had some fallout with some of the trustees. Something happened, and he felt that he had been wronged, so he gave up that position. So that type of pride he had, which wasn't a bad thing, it meant that he had principles and everything. But Thakur could see that he was continuing all of this, at least with the idea that I am the doer, which of course is very rare to find somebody who doesn't have that feeling. The more you come to love God, the less you will be inclined to perform action. So again, this is not something that we choose to do, although there's a sense in which we also do choose to do it. So on the one hand, the Divine Mother will remove our actions. She'll remove that inclination. Thakur, does he do it here? He gives we'll see the example of the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law when she's pregnant with child. On the other hand, we also have to reach a point in life where we say, okay, let me cut back on all my duties and jobs, obligations and everything, and immerse myself in spiritual practice. We have to do that also. When it comes to real duties, then that's a little bit different. If we're going to say, oh, okay, I'll abandon wife and children, I won't cook for the family anymore, I'll do my spiritual practice, and we're simply escaping things, then that's not a good thing. But if that fire of renunciation comes, and then we do it, then it's okay. So for most of us, or at least those who reach that vanaprastha age, the age at least of retirement, when the worldly duties are already less, that we don't have to raise the kids and we can give up the work and everything, then we try to spend more time in spiritual practice. But on the other hand, this feeling of duty and feeling of obligation, feeling of wanting to do work will be pulled away from us. The more we go towards God, the less we'll be inclined to do that. At a certain point, the mind will get immersed and it won't care for any external things. We'll want to go more and more inward. So this is what Thakur is talking about. And what happens, he said, let me read again. The activities you are engaged in are good. It is very good if you can perform them in a selfless spirit, renouncing egotism, giving up the idea that you were the doer. Through such action, one develops love and devotion to God and ultimately realizes Him. So those who are devotees, this will come. Those who are jnanis, through such selfless action, also this desire to realize the truth will become greater and greater. But this is, in one respect, the very orthodox belief of Karma Yoga that Shankaracharya upholds very much, that Karma Yoga is prior. We do our Karma Yoga until we're ready to reach that stage of either bhakti or jnana. With Shankaracharya, of course, it's jnana yoga, but it can also be bhakti yoga. So this Karma Yoga is meant to purify ourselves, it's meant to fulfill desires, it's meant to get rid of this feeling of I and mine, it's meant to carry us high enough so that we feel that breeze of grace. So the Karma Yoga is meant to raise the sail, and then the breeze of grace will come. The more you come to love God, the less you will be inclined to perform action. When the daughter-in-law is with child, her mother-in-law gives her less work to do. As time goes by, she is given less and less work. So month by month, as she gets higher and higher up the ladder, that her work will become lessened. When the time of delivery nears, that means God realization, she is not allowed to do any work at all, lest it should hurt the child or cause difficulty at the time of birth. I like this idea that we think of our spiritual life and our spiritual practice in terms of giving birth to a child and then nurturing that child. I often feel that our attitude towards our spiritual routine, towards our spiritual life, towards our meditation, that we should guard it, we should protect it. We look upon it as a small child, the way we would protect a small child from things, so that we try to keep to it and stick to it, to our spiritual practice. So we nurture it, we love it. We may not be able to love God, we can learn to love spiritual practice. This is a great step in spiritual life. When we reach that, we feel a little bit like we're on firm ground, a little bit safe. Then Thakur continues, but these philanthropic activities, by these philanthropic activities, you are really doing good to yourself. If you can do them disinterestedly, your mind will become pure and you will develop love of God. As soon as you have that love, you will realize Him. Man cannot really help the world. God alone does that. He who has created the sun and the moon, who has put love for their children in parents' hearts, endowed noble souls with compassion, and holy men and devotees with divine love. The man who works for others without any selfish motive really does good to himself. Okay, now, this is a very important idea, and Swamiji develops this idea. He has one lecture in Karma Yoga. What is it called? No, something about we really help ourselves, something like that. Almost exactly what Thakur is saying. That we don't help the world, we help ourselves. Now, to me, this can be very easily misunderstood, because if somebody says that, okay, what you're doing, you're not really helping anybody else, but you're helping yourself. Say somebody says that, I go to the soup kitchen every Saturday morning, and I serve food to the poor people there, the homeless people there, and it makes me feel good, like I'm doing something. And the other person says, very good. Through that, if you do it with the right attitude, you yourself will benefit very much. But are they benefiting? They'll come back hungry the next day. Somebody else could have done it. Don't think that you're doing anything so wonderful there. Then we can say, yes, I know that. I know that really I'm getting some benefit. What I'm doing for them is of limited value. It's something. If I don't do it, someone else will do it. I understand that. But if we say that you're just a complete waste of time, you're not helping anybody at all, but you're helping yourself, and we say, oh good, then I'll keep doing it. What does that mean? It means we're selfish people. We're completely So I will never believe that Thakur means that, and that Swamiji means that our motive for helping other people is that we will benefit spiritually ourselves. It's a very selfish type of idea. But we know that actually we are getting some benefit, so we should be grateful to the other person. So there are two things. One, to be grateful to the other person, and also have some humility that I know that there's very limited value what I'm doing. But it's the least I can do. At least I'm trying to do something. I recognize that. So the point of this isn't to say, well, then I won't try to help anyone. And when we say that no one can help the world, that means we can't do any big thing. We're not going to eliminate poverty. We're not going to eliminate wars. But on a small, one-to-one person basis, we know that it is possible for one person to be helpful to another person. If we look at our own lives, how many times, at least spiritually, that we've benefited from holy company, or that someone has been sympathetic, that they listen to our weeping and wailing when we're very sad and everything, and afterwards we feel, oh, what a great service they did, what wonderful, loving people they are. So it's possible, but we want to get rid of this idea that, what a wonderful thing I did for that person, how great I am. So this is meant to have a little humility, to get rid of this feeling that I can do so much, and to understand also that we don't know what the results of things are. If we stop and think, and many people do, that we're at the red light and there's somebody sticking out his hand asking for money. Huh? And then a lot of people will stop and think, oh, I know this person, he's going to take my money, he's going to go to the liquor store and buy something to drink. I'm not going to give him anything. Okay, so what may happen? We don't know what may happen. It may be that night this man doesn't have any money and he robs the store and he kills somebody. Now are we responsible for that? Maybe, in a small way. It may be the very opposite, that we give him money and we think, this poor man, let me help him, I'll give him some money, he'll be able to get something to eat, and he goes and he buys drugs with it and he has an overdose and he dies. Is it our fault? A little bit, partly our fault. The point of this is that whatever we do with a little prayer. I don't know if it's right or wrong, I'm doing it with the best possible intention. I hope that things will work out. I know that the results are not in our hands. And so with a little humility, if we try to help somebody, whenever people ask me advice, especially counseling types of things, psychological types of things, I shudder, because I know that with all good intention, I may give a certain piece of advice. It may be absolutely wrong. It may be with all good intentions, and the result may be the opposite. So I very rarely will say anything, and if I do, it'll be with that prayer, or of course with a disclaimer. I'm not a professional counselor with anything. This is just what I think may be helpful. You can try it, and that's about it. So the point is to work without any selfish motive. This is what Thakur says. Those who work for others without any selfish motive, they really do good to themselves. So we know that the karma yoga, any action that we do with a good motive, that we have that motive that we want to help somebody, a purely unselfish motive. I don't care to get any publicity. I don't care to get anything in return, any praise, nothing at all. I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart, thinking that this is probably something that may be helpful, that I'm not changing the world, and that if there's that prompting within is a good thing, then I take that as that divine presence within prompting me to do that. So with all humility, we have to try to do these things. Now with Vidyasagar, he means literally, okay, you've done enough of all this. Because remember, he's 16 years older than Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna at the time is probably, 47, something like that. So he's in the early 60s. That means that he's quite elderly for that time, and would be considered to be in that final stage of life where he has this opportunity now to really have some type of realization, approaching that time when death will come, and when whatever future life will come will be determined by the state of mind that one is in at the end. So it's out of compassion for him that Thakur is talking like this. There's gold buried in your heart, but you are not yet aware of it. It is covered with a thin layer of clay. That means this veil of Maya, this thin veil of Maya, covering that awareness of the divine presence within, or of our own divine nature. After the birth of her child, the daughter-in-law in the family busies herself with it alone. Everything she does is only for the child. Her mother-in-law doesn't let her do any household duties. So after this God realization, we enjoy the bliss of God realization. Now, when the child gets a little bit older, then of course she has more duties to do. So even the God-realized soul can, after a certain point, and we see of course with Sri Ramakrishna, all the direct disciples, then there's no harm if they try to be of benefit to the world. When Swamiji came up with his motto for the order, it wasn't simply for one's own realization. That would be too selfish. The other is for the welfare of the world. Now Thakur is saying we can help the world, but individually we can do a little bit. We can do a little bit to try to eliminate poverty and ignorance and exploitation, all different types of things, violence. In our own small way, we can do something. So this is not something that's ruled out. But right after the child is born, that means that after we have that experience, we have that state of divine inebriation. What can we do then? We simply enjoy it at that time. So the mother just enjoys the child till the child becomes a little bit older. Go forward. This was a great theme that Thakur had. And in spiritual life, we may think we've made a little progress, and then we rest on our laurels. But we can't rest on our laurels until we really get to the top. There's nothing very great about going from one rung of the ladder to the next rung. Unless we get to the roof, we haven't fulfilled the purpose of climbing the ladder. So he says, go forward. A woodcutter once entered a forest to gather wood. A brahmachari said to him, go forward. He obeyed the injunction and discovered some sandalwood trees. Now he was a woodcutter, cutting ordinary wood, firewood. Sandalwood tree, he can sell this, and they'll use it for carving, and they'll use it for malas and all sorts of things. It'll be very valuable. We all know the beautiful scent of sandalwood. So this was a very great thing. He thought, this is wonderful. Now I can become, very comfortable. I can make a little money. So he obeyed the injunction and discovered some sandalwood trees. After a few days he reflected, the holy man asked me to go forward. He didn't tell me to stop here, so he is intelligent. He stopped and thought, what does he really mean when he says go forward? Just to get the sandalwood trees, maybe there's something more. So he went forward and found a silver mine. After a few days, he went still farther and discovered a gold mine. And next, mines of diamonds and precious stones. With these, he became immensely rich. So these spiritual riches will come. More and more and more will come. We can't feel that because we made a little progress that we've done enough. We get to the next level, and then we try again to get higher and higher. When we reach the end, we'll know when we get to the diamond mine. We'll know. No one will have to tell us. We won't ask, do I have to go forward after this? We'll know that all doubts are removed at that time. Through selfless work, love of God grows in the heart. So he's telling Vidyasagar that you should finally reap the fruit of what you've been doing. You've been doing this selfless work. Hopefully it's been without any motive, and this should yield the results that you'll find that love of God, and how somebody who's leading the life that Vidyasagar is leading, how will this love of God manifest? It's an interesting question, huh? I think it'll manifest in love of humanity, seeing God in others. He's serving others faithfully. This should dawn on him at some point that it's the divine presence within him that is doing all of this, and the divine presence within the other that is the beneficiary of it. Anyhow, there may be other possible ways that this divine love will grow. So through selfless work, love of God grows in the heart. Then, through his grace, one realizes him in course of time. This grace is absolutely necessary in every spiritual path. Some of you may have participated in that San Diego conference, where the different speakers were there, and then at the end these questions were asked, and Swami Atmajnanananda, he gave a very nice answer, which I fully agree with, explaining how grace is necessary in the path of knowledge, because we know that the devotee will always feel that grace is necessary. But the path of knowledge also, why? Because the one essential thing in the path of knowledge is to transcend this feeling of I, to go past this purushakara, to go past that level of self-effort. And when we get past that level of self-effort, and when this ego starts to vanish and die, then there's no one there to do anything. And we still haven't reached the end. So we have to be pulled the rest of the way, so that grace comes. So Thakur gives the example of a huge magnetic mountain, and we're like a little piece of iron, but we're too far away from it. We have to keep walking, get closer and closer and closer. The closer we get to it, the more this feeling of I will disappear, and then when we get to that point where this I is gone forever, and we haven't reached the mountain, but we're close enough so that that magnet is strong enough, it'll pull us the rest of the way. The other example I like, Thakur was always talking about bringing water to the field. He must have dozens and dozens of illustrations using this very common example of irrigating a field. Now, if the water is at a higher level, we're trying to get it to a lower level. We dig the canal, the channel, and we have a floodgate there. We've done all of this very hard work, and then all we have to do is lift that floodgate. Now, we don't bring the water to the field. The water, the very nature of the water is that it seeks the lower ground, that this water itself will flood the field. We don't do that. That's grace. So even for the jnani, when we get rid of this ego sense, then we're flooded with that illumination, with that light. So even for the jnani, this grace is absolutely necessary. So through his grace, one realizes him in course of time. God can be seen. One can talk to him as I am talking to you. Now, I won't make any attempt to give any logical explanation for these things. We have to always remember that Sri Ramakrishna was a mystic, that he had experiences that go far beyond the experiences of even an ordinary God-relay soul. There are some things that are just beyond our ability to understand. Even this idea of avatar, can we really understand it? I read a nice thing this morning that Swamiji, and I hadn't seen this before, Swamiji used to say that we can understand Brahmajnana, we can understand the meaning of the knowledge of Brahman, but this avatara tattva, this the truth of the avatar is beyond our ability to comprehend. That means there's something that is beyond the limitations of the mind. The mind can only extend only such a distance. Now, we can't understand the real nature of Brahman with this mind, but we understand the concept of it. Avatara, we may say, oh, I understand the concept, God comes down from heaven to earth. But do we really know what that means? We don't really know what it means. But Swamiji is saying that because we don't know what it means, does that mean that it's not true? No. It means that we simply don't try to explain every possible thing. Some things we simply have to accept when the evidence is so clear that Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother, that they exhibit these qualities that we don't find in ordinary people. So we can say, well, they're extraordinary people. Avatar, this is what we mean. Someone that's completely extraordinary in so many possible ways. So, through His grace, one realizes Him. Of course, God can be seen. One can talk to Him as I am talking to you. And now, Sri Ramakrishna, he would talk to the Divine Mother, and the Divine Mother would talk to him in that ecstatic state. Or we don't even in the ordinary state, sometimes when he's talking, he would say, I feel as if Mother is providing the words for me to say. We don't know what all of this means. But he used to say, yes, I hear the voice of the Mother. I hear the tinkling of her anklets. As she's climbing the roof. He would say things like that. In his mystic vision, it was 100% real to him. Can we hear it? No. Can we reach a state where Mother will talk to us? Maybe. Maybe. Thakur says it's possible. That'll be this Vijnana state, after this highest type of realization. Before that, we have to be a little cautious. Is it my own mind? Is it Mone bhul? It's usually translated as hallucination. That Swamiji used to say about Thakur. This is all Mone bhul. This is all some funny, false ideas in his mind. That way, when he's talking to the Divine Mother and everything. Narendra Swamiji was really tough on Sri Ramakrishna in the beginning. Of course, he came to understand that it's all true. See, understanding that it's true and understanding how it's true, these are two different things. Of course, Swamiji himself, he felt as if Mother held him by the hand, as if Thakur were by his side, that he would hear Thakur's words, sometimes see him. So they had these experiences. Swami Brahmananda, many of them, Swami Premananda, Swami Premananda, Shivananda, they would see Thakur sometimes, walking the grounds at Balaram. Is it Moner Bhul? Is it a hallucination? Or is it something real? Or is it simply the fruits of their tremendous devotion? Very hard to say. In silent wonder, they all sat listening to the Master's words. It seemed to them that the goddess of wisdom herself, seated on Sri Ramakrishna's tongue, was addressing these words, not merely to Vidyasagar, but to all humanity for its good. Now, Thakur had some sense, and this is a very difficult thing to understand, because he was so artless, he was so guileless. He didn't have any artificiality to him. He didn't do anything that, oh, this will be great, and they'll write this down, and they'll do that, and people will lionize me and everything. He didn't have that at all. At the same time, he knew that why he was born and what the purpose of his birth was and everything. And he knew that M was recording everything. Now, when did he know it? For the very, very beginning? At the very beginning, maybe he recognized that M would do it. M himself didn't know it at the very beginning. We don't have dates and things, the first couple of visits, things like that. But we have a very clear indication at some point that Thakur knew. Others tried Taruk, Swami Shivananda. One day he's looking very intently. Thakur said, why are you looking like that? And he said, I'm trying to remember what you say so I can write it down. He said, don't bother. It's not for you. It's not your job. And then he knew that M was there. And so many times that Thakur, some interesting topic would be there, M would be someplace else. He'd say, oh, go bring M. Yeah, let him hear this. And sometimes he'll ask him, did you get that? And then he'll say, repeat it to me. And what did I say the other day? So it's clear that he knew that all of this was the welfare of for others, but he had no egotistical feeling. He really felt that it was the Divine Mother who was speaking, and that he was just an instrument. And this was the reason for his birth. It was nearly 9 o'clock in the evening. I don't know what time they came in the afternoon. It could be hours that had passed. And of course, no one is aware of the time or anything. The master was about to leave. Master to Vidyasagar with a smile. The words I have spoken are really superfluous. You know all this. He was a very brilliant person. He had read all the Vedanta and everything. He was a great scholar. You know all this. You simply aren't conscious of it. That means that he hasn't really thought, is this something to be applied in my life personally? I know these things are true. Anybody who reads it simply in Gita, is simply we read about this the state of Shama, the state of where we transcend this karma yoga. Anybody who reads it, they know. But how many people actually apply that to their lives? So you simply aren't conscious of it. There are countless gems in the coffers of Varuna, but he himself isn't aware of them. Vidyasagar with a smile. You may say as you like. Master smiling. Out of humility, he said that. Smiling, oh yes, there are many wealthy people who don't know the names of all their servants and aren't even aware of many of the precious things in their houses. All left. Everybody was delighted with the master's conversation. Again, addressing Vidyasagar, he said with a smile, please visit the temple garden sometime. I mean the garden of Rashmani. It is a charming place. So he's inviting him to his place. He doesn't want to say where I live. But this is to Dakshineshwar, to the Kali temple, to visit him, to come to his room, to enjoy his company. He'll be able to serve him. They'll have prasad and everything. Vidyasagar. Oh, of course I shall go. Now he's saying it. We'll find out later, does he really go or not. Thakur wasn't very pleased that he said that he would. You have so kindly come here to see me, and shall I not return your visit? Master, visit me. Okay, so remember, Thakur said, come to the garden. He doesn't say, come to me. Visit me. Oh, never think of such a thing. Vidyasagar, why, sir? Why do you say that? May I ask you to explain? Master smiling, you see, we are like small fishing boats. All smiled. We can ply in small canals and shallow waters, and also in big rivers. But you are a ship. You may run aground on the way. All laugh. Vidyasagar, he was the ocean. Huh? This was the title, of course, he was given, the ocean of wisdom. Vidyasagar remained silent. Sri Ramakrishna said with a laugh, but even a ship can go there at this season. So it's the monsoon season. Vidyasagar smiled, yes, this is the monsoon season. All laugh. M said to himself, this is indeed the monsoon season of newly awakened love. Now, they did establish a very sweet relationship. It didn't blossom into anything very special. In fact, the opposite happened, especially a fallout between M and Vidyasagar, and then later Narendra and Vidyasagar. So it didn't end that well, but at least for the moment. And this happened very often. Those who were with Sri Ramakrishna, they felt that divine presence, that joy and bliss, and then later they forgot. Even with Hadra, it would happen almost daily. And some of the others who were there, that Hridoy, that every once in a while we'd think, who am I living with? It's a great soul. They make pranam to, and other times they would think, why did they come to this man? He doesn't even know if it's daytime or nighttime. He's sitting there and saying, oh, can I see the hairs? Can I count the hairs on my arm? Then I'll know if it's nighttime or daytime. They say, what? This was Girish's feeling the first time he saw Thakur. You know, not everyone was so impressed the first time. The Swamiji himself, he met him in Surendra's house. He came to sing for him. And we don't know that he felt any tremendous attraction. Thakur said, come see me. And he said, okay, I'll come see you. And he went to see him and everything. And Girish had this opposite reaction. He said, who is this man? What pretense? Pretending I don't know if it's day or night. So some of them, they had to come a second time or a third time. Others, it was the opposite. They were greatly impressed, and then they left, and they thought, He's really a little bit crazy. And they didn't care to come back too much. So people had different reactions. This is so M said to himself, this is indeed the monsoon season of newly awakened love. At such time one doesn't care for prestige or formalities. So to see people in those days, everyone was very formal about things. You have to offer them food, you have to, water for washing their hands, this and that. You have to see them off, you have to offer to pay for the carriage hire, all these different things. But among your own people, you don't bother too much. Sri Ramakrishna then took leave of Vidyasagar, who with his friends escorted the master to the main gate, leading the way with a lighted candle in his hand. Before leaving the room, the master prayed for the family's welfare, going into an ecstatic mood as he did so. Now, this was a very common thing. It worked both ways. That generally, if Thakur went to somebody's house, they would feel that it was a great blessing for the Shubhagaman, this very auspicious coming, and this idea of this padudhuli, the dust of his feet. Very often they would say, oh, now, can you come into this room? Can you walk into that room? They want him to go to each and every room, so the room will be blessed. One of, I forget who it was, one of the women devotees, was it Golap Ma? Maybe. She said now, or Yogan Ma, that now my room has been turned into Benares, this room. Anybody who dies here will get liberation. They had such a belief. So on the one hand, many of the devotees felt that they would beseech Ramakrishna, can you bless the house, come into each room, this and that. Other times, those who weren't even aware of it, Thakur would feel some type of, not exactly obligation, but some desire in his heart to go into the different rooms to really as a blessing. And it wasn't, of course, an egotistical thing, but he recognized that. So it was an obligation of a holy man, of a sadhu, to bless the family that he goes to visit somehow. So before leaving the room, the master prayed for the family's welfare, going into an ecstatic mood as he did so. As soon as the master and the devotees reached the gate, they saw an unexpected sight and stood still. In front of them was a bearded gentleman of fair complexion, aged about 36. He wore his clothes like a Bengali, but on his head was a white turban tied after the fashion of the Sikhs. No sooner did he see the master than he fell prostrate before him, turban and all. When he stood up, the master said, "Who is this?" See, it's 9 o'clock, it's dark out, maybe just some gas lights are there, hard to see. Who is this? Balaram. Why so late in the evening? Now, who is Balaram? It's Balaram Bose, of course. He is one of the most important householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, plays a very important role in this Leela, not only with Sri Ramakrishna, but with the direct disciples after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. Thakur knew that it was not possible for everyone to come and see him in Dakshineshwar. It was a bit out of the way in those days. So he himself would go into Kolkata very often, and the place where he stayed the most, where he visited the most and spent nights, even was Balaram Bose's house. It said that he went 100 different times. 100 different times he went and stayed at Balaram Bose's house. The room where he stayed is now a shrine room. This is one of the wonderful centers of our order. Balaram Bose was a great friend of all of the disciples. His wife was the elder sister of Baburam, of Swami Premananda, and Swami Brahmananda used to stay there in his house. Swami Brahmananda was prone to getting malaria and had a fear of getting malaria. So in the rainy season, or whatever the malaria season is, he wouldn't stay to Balaram, he would stay to Balaram Bose's house. Latu Maharaj would stay there, Swami Turiyananda would stay there, many of them stayed there. So it's considered a very, very blessed place. We call it Balaram Mandir. So it's really like a temple to go there. It's been a center of the order for many, many years. The back portion, where the ladies of the family would stay and where some of the members lived and everything, was not a part of the order. Somehow, only the front portion was acquired by the order to be used as a center. And a very interesting thing that there were some proceedings, some legal proceedings, so that the entire thing could become part of the order. And one of our swamis, who was a lawyer, was the one who argued the case so that that could become part of the order. The Swami Atmajnanananda, who was a direct relative of Balaram Bose. So he was the one most responsible for that becoming part of the order now. It's a very wonderful place. I went many, many times. When I was in India for studies one year, I used to go with Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. He used to go, I don't know how often, once a month maybe, to give a talk there. And many, many devotees would come. It's a big house. There's so much of kirtan was there. Thakur loved him so much. He had a wonderful death that at the time of passing, his wife, Krishna Bhavani, what was her name? Anyhow, his wife saw that a golden chariot came and took him and ascended with him to heaven. So he was very humble, very humble. He came from a very orthodox Vaishnava family, which is a bit of a problem because the very orthodox Vaishnava families, they didn't mix too much outside of the community, the Vaishnava community. So his father and his brothers, they weren't so happy that he was going to this Kali worshipper, to Sri Ramakrishna. But they were wealthy. They had a place somewhere in Orissa. They had a place in Vrindavan, and very, very devoted and dedicated. The couple of times that his father went to Sri Ramakrishna, and brother also, they were also impressed. They recognized his greatness, but they were entrenched in their own communal feelings. So not that they became great devotees or anything, but they appreciated what he did. Still, they didn't like this Balaram. He didn't participate in any of the work of the family. They were zamindars. They had a lot of estates to look after and everything. So he was criticized a little bit by the other family members, but he didn't mind. And he also would take the side of the young boys who became monastic disciples on different occasions. I was speaking recently somewhere to someone about, with Swami Ramakrishna. You'll hear that on Sunday. When the Thakur's ashes were secretly kept apart so that the young boys, future monastic disciples, would have it for their worship, and the rest was given to Ramchandra Datta to be kept in the Kakurgachi in his garden house. It was done with the knowledge of M and the Balaram Bose. I think it was done in Balaram Bose's house even at that time. So sometimes we read about the split between the young monastic disciples and the householder disciples, especially during Kashipur. It wasn't that type of even split, that some of them, M especially and Balaram Bose, especially those two, and Giris to a certain extent also, sometimes would identify more with these young boys than with the householder disciples. So the Balaram Bose, how long he could be hours just standing out there, that he didn't want to crash the party. So Balaram, I have been waiting here a long time, sir, Master. Why didn't you come in? Balaram, all were listening to you. I didn't like to disturb you. So see that humility. The Master got into the carriage with his companions. Vidyasagar, to M softly, shall I pay the carriage hire? Just out of courtesy. Sometimes it was done. They would go someplace, and then that would be one of the obligations of the person of the host. M, oh, don't bother, please. It is taken care of. Vidyasagar and his friends bowed to Sri Ramakrishna, and the carriage started for Dakshineshwar. But the little group, with the Venerable Vidyasagar at their head, holding the lighted candle, stood at the gate and gazed after the Master until he was out of sight. And this ends the very beautiful chapter, the visit to Vidyasagar. Next time we'll begin chapter 4, advice to householders. And I will close with the closing Chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukam Bhaturavikraham Ishavataram Parameshamhidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who was stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you, everyone.